This is the Mauticast, all about open source marketing automation with Mautic. And here is your host, Eki Gemble.
Ho, ho, ho. Hey, everybody. It's that time of the year again. Well, most of my colleagues are already busy with their Christmas trees. And so this is a first time ever solo episode for me. So shout outs to Leon and to Thomas, and have a good time. And I am having a good time here with the really last Mauticast episode in 2021. In our interview, I'm talking to Andy Towne, who I met at Mautic Conference Europe this year, and we're discussing a little bit of the details of the talks that he gave at the conference. But first, like always, we have a ton of things on the list to talk about, and mainly, of course, Mautic 4.1, which is massive. Actually, we're at 4.1.1 already. But in general, we received a ton of developer-facing improvements, such as making it much easier to add custom fields to the email form, etc., etc. But even more importantly, I think are the user-facing improvements. Like one thing that I specifically love is conditional form fields. You can now build really powerful forms with Mautic. Let's say you have a contact form or a generic form, and the first question is, what is your inquiry about? Is it about support request or sales inquiry or whatever? And depending on the answer that you give there, the subsequent fields will change. Like if it's a support request, then please give me the serial number, blah, blah, blah. If it's a sales request, then what country are you in, or what have you. So that's really, really nifty and also handy to use. So take a look at that. Other things are all around emails, like you can also give or use tokens in the email recipient field or BCC and CC fields, which allows you to build really powerful internal communications in the sales team. So far, we had the send mail to contact owner feature to make sure that a specific person is notified when things happen in a campaign, for instance. Now we can make that much more complex or much more granular, if you like. Other things in the email contacts are you can now filter in segments for the email domain, which is powerful. Like, give me all the Gmail users, or give me this, or give me that. Other things, you can see the segment when you look at a contact without drilling down 3 clicks. So just like tags, you can now see the tag, the segments directly in the contact. Wow, ain't that rocket science? We finally can have custom CSS in focus items. Also really, really good and really, really missed in the past. So all that in 4.1. And one thing that I specifically love is that we no longer have to track or create contacts from 404. So all the bots that hit our page and create a ton of basically spam contacts, we can now hit a switch and say, do not track the 404s. But you need to go there and hit that switch in the configuration and tracking. It's not turned off by default because we wanted to preserve the original behavior. So you need to go there and turn off the crap. And I don't see a reason not to do that. So by all means, go there and disable the tracking of 404s. Many other things, you can find them all in the show in the release notes and in the blog post. And I will link both in the show notes, of course. One thing that is not in the 4.1 release that I was hoping for is the do not contact, or rather the exclude from do not contact feature, which would allow to have transactional emails, for instance, even if a person is on do not contact. The current behavior is do not contact is completely general, and do not contact is do not contact. But what you really want is to say, okay, do not contact refers to marketing emails. So you do want to allow transactional emails. You do want to do a allow a resubscription, etc. So the feature is there. It's just not merged in 4.1, and I sure hope it's going to be there soon in the future. So what else? One more thing that came along with 4.1 is Gitpod. And if you haven't heard of Gitpod, maybe you heard of the Mautic box. Both are easy ways to test new features of Mautic. The features in GitHub are called PRs, pull requests. And in every such pull request, there is now automatically a little button that tests this in Gitpod. And if you hit the button, a new Mautic version is spinned up for you personally, which includes the boilerplate Mautic mainstream version plus this PR that you are about to test. And you can then look at the behavior and verify that it's all well, and give the feedback right in GitHub to make sure it's ready for merge in the next version. So far, this testing has been a huge bottleneck. So this makes it even easier for everybody to test any PR. And so even if you are not a developer, there's no excuse. Please go there, pick the PRs that you find relevant, and test them and leave the feedback and allow us to get even faster in merging features into the next Mautic version. And then, of course, there was Mautic Conference. In this case, it was Mautic Conference Europe, located in Belgium, and still in the times with low COVID, and we really had no issues at all there. It was a fantastic experience. It brought back almost forgotten memories of how awesome personal interaction can be. As a conference, we had the decision to make it user-centric, to have all the talks around using Mautic, not developing Mautic, to make sure it's high-quality talks, and I think the concept worked pretty well. So we had absolute high-quality talks, and recordings should be online any day now, and then so check out the recordings in YouTube. I think it's fantastic stuff. Day 2 was contribution day, so basically team sprints of the 4 main teams that we have. It was same thing there. It was high energy. It was really productive, and people were really enthusiastic about getting back together finally. And little teaser. We're gonna have another team sprint on premise in 2022. So hold your breath. After the interview, we're going to talk about that. So what do we have in new features, third-party features rather? There's a new plugin from the good folks at Content Optimizer. And it's, I think, their first time contribution to Mautic, although they've been using Mautic quite a while. And I want to welcome them explicitly and say, hey, it's appreciated and we want to see more of you. This plugin is a double opt-in plugin, and it's really good stuff. It makes it much easier to implement a quality double opt-in process without having to build complex campaigns, etc., or losing time or having other pitfalls. It's good stuff, and it's on GitHub, and the link is in the show notes. Then there has been a Facebook custom audiences plugin for a while, but it has been outdated. And now the people at Reach Media in Hungary have taken over that code and renovated it, and it should be good now. And if you're interested in Facebook custom audiences, there you go. Here's the link to that free plugin by Attila Nagy and Tomasz Todt, I guess. And you can find more of the same company, which are a really large company in Hungary, on on the website, which I'm also linking to. Namely, there's a plugin called the Segment Randomizer, which allows you to create random subsets of a certain segment. And we also have integration plugins like with Firebase or with Lime Survey. So yeah, check that out. Some of those plugins are paid plugins, but really affordable and certainly worth a look. Then another thing, there's been a discussion in the forums was titled Mautic as Lead Distribution Platform. And Joey came up with the notion that in the past there was a really powerful plugin called the Mautic, I don't even know what it's called, Mautic Contact Client, I guess, yeah, by Heath Dutton. But that was for Mautic 2 and it has been abandoned since. And not only that, there's another sibling called the Mautic Contact Source plugin, which is basically the same as an inbound version. So one is outbound, one is inbound. Both are basically contact interface with a powerful UI with no coding involved. And having looked at that, I would think it would be fantastic to have that back in Mautic 4. And if you're also interested, maybe you should chime in the forum thread that are in the show, or that is in the show notes. And so let's motivate Heath to get back on this thing, or let's find somebody else to take it over or whatever. But it would be a good thing to have that back in Mautic. Yeah, another feature that is already there, but I noticed that many people are not aware of this simple thing, is the customization of the contact list. If you click on contacts in Mautic, there's this list with fixed columns, and there's no button or anything to select the columns that you would like to see, which I think is a bit of frustrating for many people, except there is a way to select the columns in the configuration. In configuration, there's a tab called contact list or something like that, and you can select from all the contact properties available which you want to see in the list. And obviously when you have it in the list, you can even sort by it, etc. So I think it's underrated and you should be aware of it. The drawback is obviously it's a global configuration, so it's not per user. Normally you would expect that every user can change that for himself or herself at any time. That's going to be there in the future. For now, it's a global thing, but it's better than nothing. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, once again, the GrapesJS Builder, specifically the email builder. I've talked about that before, and I complained about it before, and there's been issues left and right, and we're getting a little bit more mature now. I mean, we as in Mautic, but also we as an agency. So we're using it. And not only that, we're also beginning to see the real power behind it or beyond it. So it's not just an email builder, it's also a platform for bringing really intelligent elements to it. For instance, what we just did is create a block element that fetches product data and places little teasers in the email. So fetching the product data would go through a link that goes to a shop, and so just from the metadata it can get the title, the image, the currency, the price, obviously, etc., and what have you, and display that in an email very, very easily in a stylish way. And that's obviously only the beginning. You could take this further and work based on personal, or you could personalize this like a product recommendation, etc. So put a lot of intelligence into the email, and yeah, that's, I think it's way more than everybody else can do out there, and so we could go beyond the pack with Mautic if we did more of this. The other thing is that we started contributing back to the underlying repositories like GrapesJS and MGML. Most by Artur Arsenyev. And fixing bugs or even contributing features is an important way of open source, as we all know. And so we as an agency are now getting into the habit of doing that even for this outside properties to make sure everything is getting much better. The email builder is still not perfect, but I do think it is a huge thing. It's the number one deal maker or deal breaker even in Mautic. So if a new companies considers Mautic, more often than not, they look at the email builder as the number one thing, and sometimes they're not happy with it and walk away from Mautic for exactly that reason. So yeah, bottom line, let's all work together and make it perfect. Figure out or report the bugs, solve the bugs, add new features, make it shiny, and give Mautic the best possible, or give Mautic users the best possible experience and a lot of happiness there, and not frustration or limitation. Yeah, GrapesJS. Then last but not least, I wanted to point to yet another video thing by Joey, which is basically part one of a larger course called the free course to kickstart you in Mautic. That part one has now been published. Other parts are scheduled. And the big news here is that Joey is now offering a little bit of payment option. So far, you can be a member on his website and have access to all the resources. He's now also offering a supporter option, which I'm not sure it gives you any extra, but it's an option to say a little thank you to Joey. And if you, like me, appreciate all the content, the content that comes from him, all the unique insights and the deep dives, etc., that he is publishing all the time, then a little thank you should be more than appropriate. So we immediately became that supporter for just $19 per month, and I think you should do the same. Go to joeykeller.com/memberships and sign up for the supporter level on a monthly basis. Okay, that said, let's now move on to the interview of this episode, and that's with Andy Towne, who I met at Mautic conference, and we're talking about deeper things in using Mautic. Here we go. Yay, and there we go. Hello, Andy Towne. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here. It's been really exciting the last couple of weeks since we were able to meet at Mauticon, and glad we were able to work out a time to do this.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited about the topics that we're going to talk about. It's a little bit about Mautic conference, which you just mentioned, but also about things in Mautic that you also mentioned at Mauticon, but maybe elaborate a little bit here. Before we do that, let's give people a little bit of background about yourself. I mean, you are with Acquia, but I'm pretty sure you had a life prior to that. So give us a little background, please.
Yeah, I actually went to college to do sports broadcasting and wanted to do that full time as a career, but after working for a couple of baseball teams here in the U.S., kept hearing I needed to do sales, so I started to do sales for a few years, and then started actually as a salesperson for Mautic Inc., selling the Mautic Cloud platform, which of course got acquired by Acquia, and that's kind of how I got in. And I still do the sports stuff for fun here and there, which is it's good. And things like this, the radio shows and podcasts, have fun with those once in a while too.
So you switch from baseball to basketball, is that right?
I do basketball, and actually at Harvard, which is where I do most of my work, do things like basketball, hockey, water polo, field hockey, rugby. It really runs the gamut.
Okay. Is there any sports background on that? Like you were an enthusiastic, whatever, water hockey player in the past or so?
No, they just the broadcast setup there with all of their games for pretty much all their sports.
You're a nerd.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So they just needed people to do different games, and I learned it.
Really cool. So when you say you got in touch with Mautic Inc. originally, what year are we talking about? How long have you been around?
It would have been 2017.
Okay.
And it just started out with, I don't even remember if it was a LinkedIn message or just the easy apply button on LinkedIn, but got a message back from Matt Johnston, the CEO of the company at the time, and things went well from there, and here I am today.
Yeah, those were the early days. Maybe it was the fax even. No.
Yeah.
But when you say here you are today, tell us about your current role a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a marketing cloud consultant at Acquia, so I focus on working with our largest customers for the Acquia Marketing Cloud, which does include our CDP product as well as Acquia Campaign Studio, which is based on the Mautic open source project. So while there are some differences between the two, at its core, they're the same product. So it's great to work with that, and as a dumb sales guy a few years ago, I was able to pick things up and did a lot of my learning with Mautic just by using it, and now what I've learned over the last 4 years and change, being able to actually help enterprise level organizations, as well as like small and medium sized companies, get the value out of Mautic and Campaign Studio. It's really interesting what people can do with it and how quickly they can learn it.
Okay, so when you say consultant, etc., that's not just corporate lingo for sales person. You're actually doing projects with people, right?
Correct. It's all about implementation. I don't have to worry about selling anything. I am just helping people use our products.
Okay, I love it. Okay. At Mautic conference, you gave a talk that I can, by the way, really recommend to people to watch on YouTube once it's published. What was the name? Something crawl to, I don't remember.
I don't actually remember the title of it officially, but
it's a really funny title. But
yeah, the idea of it was advancing from newsletters to full marketing automation.
Yeah, and if your listeners watched that talk, you will see that it has a very interesting perspective on this process, but it also contains little gems left and right, and so I asked Andy to talk about those gems and less known features and underutilized things, etc., a bit more in detail here in the show. So, what do we want to talk about first?
Why don't we start a little bit more with like the personalization, because I think it's a lot of what people want to do with marketing automation. And Mautic really does have a lot of tools that you can use for personalization that just get overlooked or aren't really well known. But they're pretty simple to set up. And if you can come up with some sort of even a very basic strategy around it, they can be really, really powerful to help marketing organizations both collect first-party data, which is really important these days, and then use that to personalize the experience and, of course, end up in making more sales.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, so what specifically do you have in mind?
So dynamic web content, I think in particular, is one area that people know about dynamic web content by itself, but there's a couple little things like using tokens on landing pages or using focus items in different ways that dynamic content can be even more powerful than just, say, changing a header image on a page or changing a paragraph of text somewhere on your website or on a landing page. So on a landing page, normally you're not able to use a token and say anything like hello first name, or here's the benefits that this product can provide to this company, or use any of that information that you have collected about a person or their company. But if you just create the same content that you normally would use on the landing page, just put that into a dynamic content slot, put that slot on the landing page, and you can use any of those tokens. So it's a little bit of a workaround, but it gets you that end result that you're probably looking for, to really personalize that without going crazy with like different pieces of content for different people or different personas.
Ah, got it. Okay, and of course, when you say a landing page, that does not have to be a Mautic landing page. It could be anything like WordPress or Drupal or what have you,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Any CMS that you use, and I think a lot of people do think, particularly with Campaign Studio, like it works well with Drupal, but I started, or some might say grew up, using it with WordPress because I could download a WordPress site for free, or get it hosted on their site for free. And I set up the connector, and that's really what I started to get to know, and did a lot of testing and playing around with Mautic with WordPress. But it really doesn't matter what CMS you're using.
Yeah.
Dynamic content, tracking, anything, forms, anything that you would want to do between Mautic and your website, doesn't matter what you're using.
Okay. And so in that example, what role do focus items play?
So with focus items, there's a few different things that you can do. So one, we see a lot of like cookie acceptance. That's really important with GDPR. Opting into newsletters, things like that. Like if you have your little pop-up that comes, whether it's the bar at the top or the bottom, a modal, the little corner pop-up, whatever type of focus item you would want to use, for a newsletter sign up or something pretty simple like that, you don't want to ask somebody to sign up for your newsletter if they've already signed up. So you can do something as basic as, if somebody's email address is already known, don't show the focus item at all. But if you don't have somebody's email address, if it's an anonymous visitor on your site, you can have that one simple form on your focus item, ask for the email address, and then once that form is submitted, don't show that focus item anymore, unless they come back and say a different browser or a different device where they're not tracked, which there's not a whole lot you can do about then.
Okay, so instead of putting a lot of logic into campaigns and trigger the focus item from there, you can place the same thing or some sort of logic in the dynamic web content and then trigger the focus item from that. Is that right?
Yeah, your dynamic content filter would really just be email address is empty. And then if you get to the, or somebody gets to your page, again, landing page or website where that slot exists, if you don't have their email address or they're not previously tracked, that focus item will appear. Okay. It can also work if you want to collect different information about somebody, like they work for one type of company. You can get a little bit more information about that specific company, or probably a good example that I might recommend to Acquia to use is, we work a lot with developers and with marketers. So if we find out that somebody is a marketer, we could ask one set of questions using a form, whether it's directly in dynamic content or on a focus item. Any way we would do that. Whereas if it's a developer or a technical person, we would have completely different questions about what's important to them and how Campaign Studio or any of Acquia's other products might benefit them.
Yeah, that's basically the regular targeting based on DWC. And
right.
Combining that with focus items is something I didn't think of, frankly. That's cool. Speaking of focus items, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say one other thing is, like, if you have a question or two that you put on a form, or show only a question or two at a time using progressive profiling, you can pick up little bits of information about somebody without asking for their email address. So in some cases, people just don't want to give their email address as the first thing they do when they get to a website, but they might be more likely to just answer one question. Again, using the Acquia example, if we just had one question, are you a marketer or a developer? Somebody might answer that pretty quickly. They're not giving away a whole lot of information. And then right away, we could start to personalize the web experience with content that is more relevant to marketers versus developers, depending on that answer.
Interesting, because there's also this opposite approach in saying, okay, let's get to the lead as quickly as possible and with as little barrier as possible, to have some sort of motivation to enter the email address and then maybe confirm to some opt-in, but don't ask anything else at that point, and rather ask things after the fact. But I think this strategy of not asking for the email straight away, I mean, except if it's a real landing page and call to action, etc. But yeah, interesting approach. It's really,
yeah, it can help build a little bit of trust with people that might be a little bit hesitant to give away their email address.
Yeah, I think this probably applies more to a general web page as opposed to a very to the point landing page with call to action and everything, which is specifically made for this conversion. But maybe even in this concept, it's interesting. I haven't thought about that. So yeah, we did talk about this concept of building trust and not getting to the point directly in a different talk at Mautic conference in a drip campaign. But this is really the same thing here. Cool. Yeah, getting back to this little question about focus items, just a side question, maybe you can answer that. Focus items have those types that you mentioned, so like the slide in or the modal or the bar. And now on the mobile, it is pretty much required that we don't do modals, we don't do anything else except bars. So that's what you want to do on mobile. What's your favorite way to make that distinction? Is it also dynamic content or any other ways that you have?
Yeah, it's not actually something that I've done before or seen our customers do, but in theory, you would be able to use dynamic content and just use the device type filter and say device type is, say, desktop, and in that case show the modal or whichever style you'd want. But then if it's a mobile device or, say, a smartphone, a tablet, or phablet, there's a few other options in there that you could use to show just the bar or whatever other style you'd want to use.
Oh, very cool. I have to admit that we do a lot of campaign-based focus items, and there's not an option there, obviously. So we work around with JavaScript statements, etc., to make sure we have the bar on mobile and whatever else we want on desktop. But that's pretty nifty. Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to test it myself, but in theory, that should do the trick.
It should. Huh, cool. So what else? We are still in the area of personalization. I know you did talk about translation feature a bit.
Yeah, translations, particularly for anybody in Europe or who has a multi-geographical or multi-regional marketing effort. Using translations can be a pretty easy and powerful way to reach people in their native languages. So, say you have, I'll use just a European example. your headquarters is in the UK and you want to send something in English, but a lot of your target market is, say, in France, and they really only want to read content that is in French. You can just use a translation of either an email or a landing page and say, here's the French version. When somebody is either in a campaign or receiving something as a segment email, or just visiting a page, if you know that their preferred language is French, of course they have to be tracked, and if you've got multi language options on your website, passing that preferred locale information back into your Mautic instance, that's how you would be able to say, show this content to this person in French or whatever other language you would use the translation of. But it's that preferred locale field that if that's populated with a language that you've created content for, you'd automatically be displaying that content to that person when it gets sent out or when they visit the page.
And that applies even to, I mean, I know that's the case for campaign emails, but I wouldn't have been sure about segment emails.
Segment emails, yep, it applies to that. And actually, because I was looking at the dynamic content a few minutes ago, I just noticed that it works on dynamic content too. So we have the translation option there.
Yeah. And getting back to the preferred locale for a second, I think that's not so tricky after all, because Mautic will find out the preferred language for any website visitor from the browser language. So in that case, it is populated as far as I know. And that there are situations where it can be overruled by, for instance, a form, or maybe even the language chosen in the website and transferred back to Mautic. But in general, we should have a pretty good understanding of the preferred language of the user. And then sending the message in the right language is something that is a smart idea. But in reality, I have to say, I rarely see it. Typically, everybody works with segments, etc., with some sort of static setup or a static assignment of the language. But
yeah, either that or like campaign conditions I've seen too, which can get pretty unwieldy if you have a lot of languages that you're working with. But if you only have two, I know we've had a customer that used English and Dutch, and you can just use either different campaigns and segments or just a condition to say, is the preferred locale English versus Dutch or whatever other language. But yeah, the translations feature makes that even easier. You just have to create the email and then skip all the extra segments and campaign steps.
Yeah, and it really works. That's beauty. Yeah. Oh, I feel like we're getting a little bit technical here for an audio podcast. It's maybe hard to follow for people. Is there anything else like underutilized things that you want to bring up?
I think those are the main ones that I would really love to see people use more. And I think really great stories that you can tell, and marketers can get a whole lot of information and use just those little tiny things that are really easy to set up. I mean, you hear a lot with any marketing automation tool. It can even include Mautic. Like, there's a lot there, and it's just really hard to use all of it and get the full value. And I mean, to an extent, I agree with that. Like, it does take a lot of work to get a ton of extra value and use every little detail of every piece of Mautic, but not everything is important to every business. It's just open enough and flexible enough that there's plenty of options available for marketers to get plenty of value, and for developers, of course, to play around and get really flexible and creative with Mautic.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that it really, it can be seen that you have a lot of real life experience and you really care about the actual tasks of the marketer, not so much the developer perspective, etc. It's a refreshing perspective, and I think we should have much more of that. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the Mautic conference a bit more. It's been like, wow, what's it, 2.5 weeks now? It feels like ages because that was days when people, at least here in Europe, were still meeting in person without feeling bad about it. Now we're all going back to our own rooms. Okay. But beside that, from a distance, what is your first thought, or what stuck most, except the beer, of course?
Well, I mean, in Belgium, the beer, I guess second would be the chocolate, but but beyond that, the actual content of the conference. I mean, it was great to meet a whole lot of people and be in a room with a whole lot of people that have pretty deep knowledges of Mautic, but also people that were there to learn. There were a pretty good handful of people there that really weren't familiar with Mautic, and from conversations with them during and after the conference, really were able to learn a lot, pick up a lot of ideas that they can take back into their own marketing and become some of those stories that we talked about, and not be afraid of everything that Mautic can do. Go from sending some pretty basic newsletters and start to do a little bit more. So that the knowledge that was in the room and the passion for marketing and doing different things and the creativity was really great to see. When you get people that know and are passionate about the same thing, it just gets ideas flowing, and to have that even with only a little bit of planning time, I think the team that put the Mauticon together did a great job given the circumstances there, and having that group together was great to just meet people from primarily Europe, but all over the world as well.
Yeah, maybe just to step back a little bit for everybody who is not fully aware of it. This was Mautic Conference Europe, so we're not doing global in-person conferences. We're doing the online thing that is really inclusive for everybody, but the in-person things are always per continent, and this year it was Europe. On short notice, I have to admit. And I would also agree that the conversation, the networking, was really impressive, even compared to on-premise conferences that we had in previous years. Obviously, it's a completely different animal compared to online, and it's super refreshing and very, very exciting to be back in person and talk to people in reality and see the body language and everything. But it worked exceptionally well at this conference. I think it just was a really good rhythm between the talks, like talk and a little bit of pause and a lot of energy and the people willing to chat, etc. It worked very well with this personal factor and conversational thing, etc. Do you think that this focus on using Mautic was a good idea? Did that work well for you? I mean, frequently we see heavy focus on developers and coding, etc. And in this case, we said, let's make this a users conference. Would you repeat that next time?
I don't think for every time, because I think it is important to have some focus on the developers and what developers can really do, or how to optimize databases and things like that. For me personally, yes, the marketer side and how to actually use Mautic and all the features and everything, that was my wheelhouse. I don't know anything about the technology side of it. I can just kind of help people actually use it and do their marketing without worrying too much about the technology. We've got people that do that. I know in a lot of companies, the marketers and the people that set up Mautic and maintain it, those are very different people. So I think it is important to have a balance, and in some years with more planning, might be able to have two different tracks where people can choose which sessions to go to, and probably a couple of those sessions would be great to have a little bit of both in there. Like, how can one piece of development, or how can what a developer does directly impact what the marketer does?
Yeah, good point. And yeah, I think one of the topics of conversation was always ideas for improvements from more beautiful lighting to what have you. But is there anything you would change in general?
I think the only thing would be more advanced planning, but that was really a matter of circumstance for this year. So even in the conference, there was talk about sessions that are going to be coming up, and I know that there are people already working on the next in-person and remote conferences. So the more different ideas, the more different sessions that can get out there, I think will make the conferences even more powerful and draw even more people to attend them.
Yeah. The next global conference online is already scheduled. I think it's oh my gosh. We'll have it in the show notes, but it is in May anyway. And the next in-person conference is in November 2022, but we don't have a location yet. There's going to be a call for suggestions where people can pitch their own content and help us figure out where to go next year. I know you also attended the community sprint day on Tuesday. So the day after the actual conference, we had an extra day for everybody who wanted to stay, where the Mautic teams met and got a lot of things done, and also had a lot of people attending for the first time, either online or offline. This was also your first one, right?
It was. It was the first real interaction with the community that I'd had, other than back in my sales days, just kind of keeping an eye on who might benefit from paying us to do use the Mautic cloud. But no, it was great to actually work on improving the community, because I think there's a lot of energy and a lot of intelligence out there that is good not only for marketing use cases, but people who actually build the features and can write the code for that. And I know that's kind of how Mautic started, is with the technology folks, but getting the bridge and getting developers and marketers together is a great environment to be in.
Yeah, that's true. It's one thing that we got a ton of things done on that day, which normally in online back and forth would have taken ages. But the other thing was indeed that everybody went home really energized and with a feeling like wow, this was so cool. I'm so motivated. Yeah, so there's going to be more of this. I think in April is when the next in-person sprint is going to be, and I can just recommend that highly to everybody to join that sort of sprint, even if you have not been an active contributor or active member of the community so far. It's an amazing way to meet people, to get to know people personally, learn a lot, and bring a lot of motivation with you, and so on. And so I can't speak highly enough of that. You may notice.
Yeah. And even though I spent most of the day with the marketing team working on the upcoming pitch deck for Mautic, one of the things that I was most excited about coming out of that community day was the Gitpod integration for testing. The technical teams, and I'll give Dennis a lot of credit on that, because I think he did a lot of work on it, but certainly wasn't the only one. So, and that was a work that had been in progress for a while, but really opening up the door for more people, and particularly the marketers, to test features and make sure that they work as the marketer wants them to work. Because me personally, I don't have my own Mautic open source installation. I just use the Acquia Campaign Studio. I have my cloud instance. Our DevOps team takes care of all the installation and optimization, and that's how it is for a lot of marketers. So it's been hard for developers to rely on marketers to have a test instance available and actually say, yep, this works, or nope, we want to make some changes. Doing something a little bit different would make my job a little bit easier. So that I think will make it a lot easier for people to get involved with the testing and hopefully move things along faster in releases.
Yeah. For people who haven't heard of it, Gitpod is something like the replacement of the Mautic box, the test environment for testing changes in development. I think we'll have that as a topic in the podcast as well in the future. And in general, this room full of developers, the product team was in a separate room from everybody else, I have to say. But to see that room full of developers, really full day, full speed, that was cool. I'm still excited. Okay. I think we need to wrap this up. We've been talking a lot. We could talk a lot more. I always feel like I've shortcut things, but then again, it's such a lot of things to talk about. We need to do this again. For now, do you have any famous last words? Any message to Mautic folks out there?
I'll just say that particularly being at the Mautic conference was really energizing. I know I mentioned earlier I haven't had a whole lot of direct interaction with the community before, but really excited about some of the things that are coming up and the future over the next few years of what's happening with Mautic. So hopefully I'll get to meet more people at future Mautic conferences, whether it's online or in-person events.
Yeah. By all means. Okay, thank you so much, Andy. For people who want to stalk you online, where would they find you?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. It's linkedin.com/in/Andy Towne.
Oh, that's easy. And we put it
easy first, last name.
Yeah, Towne is not as easy. Towne was an E.
Yes, the old English version, or Scottish.
Oh, yeah, I was guessing. So, no. Okay, we'll put that in the show notes for everybody to click on, and I thank you so much for all those insights today, and I'm looking forward to talk to you soon.
Same. Thank you as well, Eki.
Cheers, Andy. Take care. And there we go. Okay, a little bit of follow-up. The first sprint is actually scheduled now for the first week in May, or rather for beginning of first week in May. Location yet to be defined. But we do have the dates scheduled. If you're interested in attending, do drop me a line. Or even if you're interested in hosting the sprint maybe, or sponsoring the sprint, also appreciate it. Touch base with me. The sprint is not yet officially announced, but the earlier you get things sorted out, the better it is. Get in touch on Slack or wherever. Thank you very much. Then we had a survey, of course. We did talk about this on the Mauticast, and Ruth presented the results on the Mautic conference, at the Mautic conference rather. And I found some to be really surprising. Obviously, this is a little bit of foundation for decisions that we as the Mautic community all have to make. So is this an important feature? Can we drop this feature because nobody's using this? Is there high demand for this or that? The link is in the show notes, and have a look yourself. And I think it's more interesting actually than I expected. So take a look yourself. Another thing at the Mauticon was the Mautic Pitchdeck. It was a topic in the marketing team sprint on the day 2, and the Pitchdeck is there to help Mautic service providers to present Mautic properly to their clients or prospective clients. And if you are in the same position, maybe you already have some marketing material or some case studies or whatever, please also go to the link that is in the show note and look at the existing notes from the sprint. B, contribute whatever you have to add to that document, or get in touch with Toby or with Ruth or whoever from the marketing team, and give them your input, and it's appreciated like always. Then another shout out goes out to Spain, to Juan Serra and to Julio Roldos, who now have a Spanish Mautic podcast. Hooray! It's called Un Café con Mautic. I have no idea whether the pronunciation is right. It's actually available on YouTube, so you can watch the two in their conversation. And they have a rapid flow of smaller episodes on certain topics. So it's just worth a look if you're good in Spanish, or if you're maybe if you want to polish up your Spanish and Mautic skills at the same time. You will find the link. Like always, you know where to find it, don't you? Then one last thing about Mautic conference. We are obviously facing the next ones. We have a global online event in Q2, and then in November probably we'll have the real life event. So 2 more Mautic conferences coming down the line, and we need help. So what we did is we wrote down the roles, the things that have to be done in the organization, and we're now looking for many more people to pick up smaller roles. And this call for volunteers, there's a blog post about it. I'm going to link to the blog post, and there's also a deep description of the various roles. And so no matter if you are a designer, editor, user, developer, you name it, translator, we need all sort of skills, and nothing specific. We need all sorts of skills. So check it out and support the Mautic conference by helping out, or if you like, by sponsoring, etc. Yeah, and talking about helping out, there's another thing that we start doing as the Mautic project. We are also helping out other open source projects, and namely those who we are using within Mautic. Because Mautic is not built from scratch, but obviously it's building upon low-level projects. And I think giving back to them is a really good thing. It's not hugely widespread so far in the open source world, but we think we want to show our appreciation and maybe start something there. And so we want you to decide who we should donate to. Basically, we're talking about $200 that we want to give to others just as a sign of appreciation. And times 10. And if you click on the link in the show notes, there is a list of projects, of potential projects, and we want to pick 10, which we want to say a little thank you in 2022. So go there, make your choices, please. And speaking of giving back, obviously giving is much better than taking. If you want to donate for Mautic, if you feel this is a season, by all means, please do that. Here's a link, opencollective.com/Mautic/donate. And the Mautic project really needs that money to allow sprints to happen, to allow all the technical infrastructure to be maintained, etc. And also some of the money even goes into code, although the majority of it is, of course, a contribution. Maybe it's a good idea for Christmas. Maybe it's a good idea for the new year to become a continuous donor on GitHub or on Open Collective. So please do that. And a huge thank you to everybody who already does. Some are private persons, some are agencies, some are using companies, some are professional services. Thanks to all of you, and also thanks to everybody else involved in the Mautic project and everybody else who's making Mautic great in the past and in the future. And I'm looking forward to the future. I am wishing you a wonderful holiday season, and a peaceful and healthy 2020. And I'm going to talk to you next year. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.